Our 3 Cents is a podcast series where myself and two of my very best gaming chums have been counting down our top 100 favourite video games of all time. Our lists are as eclectic as they come, but there are of course some games that will inevitably feature on all three of our lists. When this glorious moment of unification happens, we will produce one of these videos where we combine all three of our contributions from the podcast for a game that has officially been our 3 Cents approved. Finally, but not feastly, it is Chris.
Oh, it is, isn't it? It's Chris.
Oh boy.
Can you please tell us what your 60th favourite video game is, please?
Of course I can. Imagine Dynasty Warriors.
Yes.
Except you actually care about the characters.
Yes.
Because they're not based on an epic novel about the warring factions of feudal China. It's Hyrule Warriors.
Oh.
Yes! Yes!
So I bought Hyrule Warriors for the Wii U originally on a bit of a whim. Like I hadn't really heard that much about it. I popped into a supermarket on day of release to probably like pick up a sandwich or something, and then saw it in the chart and thought, I'll give it a go. It's probably quite interesting. I don't have like a massive connection to Zelda like I've mentioned before, but this looks pretty fun. I've played Warriors games in the past that were all right. And then I went home and essentially played it over a few weeks for like 40 odd hours.
That's probably the most amount of time you've put into any Zelda game, isn't it?
Yeah, easily. Pretty much, yeah. And I mean, in that time, I barely scratched the surface of the game. Like, it's huge. And then a few years later, when it was announced they were going to port Hyrule Warriors to the 3DS under the Legends moniker, I thought, well, I really enjoyed it in the Wii U, and surely handheld it's going to be even more addictive. So, yeah, bought that one, played it for probably 50 hours this time. And with the amount of added content they put in, I scratched even less of the surface of the game. Then, again, fast forward a couple of years, for some reason, it's announced yet again for the Switch under the Definitive Edition. And this time I played it for probably 60 or 70 hours. And for the amount of stuff that's in this game now, I may as well not even press start on the title screen. For my progress in the grand scheme of things was so tiny and minuscule.
Granular.
Yeah, exactly. It is a huge game. Basically, you choose a character from the extended Zelda canon in each stage, as it were. You biff the noses of 1,000+ enemies from various Zelda games. You give a big boss a bit of a hiding, and then you just repeat. And it's a game that has a very, very simple core gameplay loop. Like, as anyone who's played a Warriors game probably knows, there's kind of light tactical elements, but generally it's just a big old fight, win the day, off you go, and repeat. But, as my 150 collective hours attest, it is very, very addictive and very, very enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I talked about Euro Truck last week, I talked about how open world games sometimes make me a bit anxious because they have this kind of sprawling to-do list. It's all laid out in front of you. And it never feels like you can get through it. Whereas with Hyrule Warriors, by virtue of kind of each battle or map being independently fun and enjoyable and rewarding and kind of self-contained in a way, every stage is fun. And by extension, I never felt kind of stressed out about the wider game, no matter how large it was, because I knew that each chunk I was going to play, whether it was just like a battle or a few battles, they were fun enough and felt like I'd kind of achieved something within that I didn't feel like there was still this massive laundry list behind me that I had to tick off. I'd say that the story mode in Hyrule Warriors that kind of pairs together all sorts of Zelda timelines and games and things, which again, who knows what's going on because I haven't played half of them, but it's as big as most average size sort of AAA games. So the story mode will run you a good chunk of time. But what you get after that or what you start playing after that is the adventure mode with its adventure maps that is just humongous.
Yeah.
Where you're basically the original map. It was the full map from Zelda 1, wasn't it? Where it was broken up into squares.
Yeah.
And each square was its own kind of unique battle. Each square would have like several different objectives within it. Each square might have kind of like the hidden, what they called sculptures, and other bits and pieces. And it was just ridiculous how big it was. And then in addition, you got all these extra maps that had come with the 3DS version originally and the DLC packs that had come originally with the Wii U title, all of which were of a similar size, but then referenced other games like the Wind Waker or Link's Awakening and different things like that. And you could easily play Hyrule Warriors exclusively for an entire console generation and still end up with characters left to level up or weapon sets left to find and max out.
Oh, yeah.
It's implausible how big this game is, how kind of generous it is with things to do. But I mean, none of this would matter if the core fighting wasn't fun.
Yeah.
But it's brilliant. It's cracking. It's fantastic. And I mean, it starts off quite simple. Your moveset quickly begins to kind of expand as you find kind of different items that will essentially level your character up. And it makes it so that the combos, despite being kind of slick and visually exciting, they still have a surprising amount of customization. And you end up with quite a lot of nuance to kind of the attack strings themselves and how you can kind of cancel out of certain combos to transition into other moves and stuff like that. And when you include also kind of the added sort of tactical options that came with the 3DS version onwards, it means fighting these wild scale battles, they feel really large, but also really manageable because you're leaping between characters, you're kind of clearing out a whole area before you jump to the other side of the map using the little like owl totems. As I've said, I'm not really the right person to talk about how it pays reverence to previous entries in the franchise, seeing as I haven't really dented many games outside of Link's Awakening and Breath of the Wild. But from what I read and from what you guys said at the time, I think it's similar to how Ubisoft really nailed the tone of the Mushroom Kingdom denizens in Rabbids Kingdom Battle.
Yeah. The
collection of Omega Force and Team Ninja in collaboration with Nintendo. They really knocked it out of the park for this one. That it feels like a Zelda game despite the fact it's in a very different genre. And I think, the question we had a few weeks ago about taking an established franchise and putting it into something else, this is probably a really good example that didn't even occur to me at the time when we talked about that.
Yeah.
Of, taking the core systems of Zelda, essentially, and placing it in a totally different framework, and yet it's still feeling like it kind of ticked the boxes that you're meant to have in a Hyrulean adventure.
Yeah.
It's a really rich, forever rewarding game. And I think it offers like a genuine scaling challenge as well, because you can pick it off in very easy modes if you just want to blast through these fights. You can delve really deep into the adventure stuff if you want to really push yourself. And it just never felt like it grew stale. I didn't finish it because it's an insane slate of content, but I played an awful lot for me for a game that is, on paper quite simple. And it's just a great game. It's a really, really good game. And the Switch version is by far the way that you should play it if you're going to pick it up today.
Yeah, I remember when you got Hyrule Warriors Legends on the 3DS and said to me that I should get that.
Yeah.
And I did, and I had a great time. But there was always part of me that thought, I'd love to be able to play this with like better graphics and more stuff going on and etc. And when they announced Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for the Switch, I said, I hope that they are going to release a Hyrule Warriors DX or Deluxe or something at some point. And I was so thrilled when they announced that they were doing it. Everything in it, from all of the versions, with all of the graphics, and I can play it in handheld. I was so excited, and like you, I have played it for an absolute ton of hours and haven't scratched the surface. No. Just quickly looked it up now on howlongtobeat.com. They say for all three versions of the game that the main story is around about 14-15 hours to beat. To do the completionist, which be 100% it, for Hyrule Warriors Legends, they reckon it is about 105 hours.
Yeah.
For the original Hyrule Warriors, about 205 hours. And for the definitive edition on the Switch, 343 hours.
Jesus Christ.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's bananas, isn't it? Absolutely bananas.
It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I'm sure there are people out there who have 100%ed it.
Yeah, of course.
The really nice thing about it, and one of the reasons why I bought it digitally as opposed to physical edition, was because I knew that I'd always come back to it.
Yeah.
And it's not like Xenoblade Chronicles where you put it down and you pick it up a week later and you've forgotten all of the mechanics. You can dive straight back into it. There's always going to be something more to do, and it's just the most wonderful celebration of Zelda, as much as it is just a fantastic game.
Yeah, I can't think of many other games where story mode is basically the tutorial.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Story mode sort of went through Link's story, then through Ganondorf's story, Lana and Sia's story, and that gave you sort of the building blocks of how to play these characters, and then it thrusts you into like 8-10 different maps where you would play as every other character. It's an extraordinary game in terms of its scope, and it really is a remarkable achievement. It's a fantastic game.
next we have my game.
Jonathan Dunn.
My game this week is a game that I feel like I had quite a long road to. I originally played the port of it on the 3DS, but really wish that I'd got the full Wii U version. But then, my actual prayers were answered when a definitive edition of the game was announced and released on the Switch and fulfilled all my dreams for the game, which is, of course,
Wow.
Hyrule Warriors.
Yes, it is.
Fantastic.
For those of you who haven't heard of it and missed the episode where Chris had it featured as his 60th favourite video game of all time, Hyrule Warriors is a Zelda-themed Dynasty Warriors game, essentially. Now, I've never played a Dynasty Warriors game, but they are pretty much fast-paced and chaotic action arcade games where you'll have control of a main hero to take on vast hordes of enemies whilst also trying to retain strategic control over the battlefield through occupying various forts and strongholds. And it's a brilliant fit for a Zelda skin because you've got an amazing lineup of heroes and anti-heroes and villains, a whole series worth of different weapons and abilities, every single biome under the sun to base battlefields around, like a general overall governmental structure that marries well with the idea of large forces and strongholds, and also about 30 years of rich and succulent lore to draw on.
Oh, yeah.
Now, with all of this incredible content to use, you would initially think that there was going to be huge swathes of Zelda history that would be abandoned to make way for a more streamlined video game experience. But oh no, it is quite incredible that it's taken a third-party approach to produce what is essentially the most comprehensive museum collection of all that has ever been created in the Legend of Zelda video game series. In order to make this work, the development team take several cunning approaches. Firstly, for the main story mode, there is a branching narrative that utilises rifts in time and space to collide the different Zelda timelines and dimensions, allowing characters, enemies and storylines from all the different games to coincide and interact in a cohesive way. And it shouldn't work. It really, really shouldn't. When Nintendo produced the Hyrule Historia book of, in air quotes, official Zelda history, they rather convolutedly tried to make a tangible timeline, or rather series of timelines, to link all of the games together. So you have the pre-Ocarina of Time games, which set the history of Hyrule, like Skyward Sword and the Minish Cap. Then you have the timeline-splitting event of Link's duel with Ganon in Ocarina of Time, whereby the games continue along splintered timelines depending on whether or not Link was defeated, whether or not he survived and stayed as a child, or whether he survived and sealed Ganon away as an adult. If I haven't said it before, I really don't think that this is necessary at all. I think it's fine for the games to have solid links between them, with some obviously working as direct sequels like Majora's Mask to Ocarina of Time, or A Link Between Worlds to A Link to the Past, or having concurrent games like Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, but as far as I'm concerned, the games can just exist in the same video game universe and share common story beats, characters and threads, and there could be some lovely subtle lore built into the games to hint at events in other games or links to other characters, but that would be enough. It doesn't need to be this big coherent thing that's massively shoehorned into place. I remember before Breath of the Wild came out, and this was the first Zelda game to come out after this official timeline had been established, and people were trying to speculate where that might fit into the timeline, and I think Minty came up with the lovely idea that it could take place before Wind Waker, and the outcome of Breath of the Wild would see the entire of Hyrule become flooded in a bid to stop Ganon.
Yeah.
That would have been really cool, and a nice link between the games. That would have been a nice way of doing it.
Well, we've got the sequel. It can still happen.
Indeed. It could. We will see. Anyway, Hyrule Warriors didn't need to find a tangible link between all of the games for it to work. But it did, and it worked surprisingly well, and they handled the franchise with an enormous amount of care and love, and showed an attention to detail that even the most ardent pig-headed Zelda fan couldn't turn their snout up at. It's a gammon pun.
Gammon.
But the story mode, which featured a whole bunch of content, including the additional side narratives to play as Ganondorf to see his side of the story, was only the tip of the iceberg. Probably around 20-25 hours of play in those, with various secrets to find in the different levels, different rankings of scores to get. You could easily have been happy with just that as a core game, and you would consider your money suitably worthed. Chris also mentioned this when he spoke about the game, but it's worth reiterating just how much bloody content there is in the game.
Oh, it's crazy.
Multiple Adventure Mode. Adventure Mode had all of these maps, and for each map in this mode there were at least 100 levels with its own individual parameters, clear goals, characters, setups, enemies, and it was, I mean, to be honest, quite overwhelming. But the way the maps looked was great. The first one is based on the original overworld map from the Legend of Zelda game, and each screen of the map equated to one level. And in these levels there were also loads of collectibles, new weapons, armour for your characters, loads of secrets and score rankings as well to keep you coming back for more. And then there were several of these maps which would be themed around the different Zelda games from the series, like Link's Awakening, and there's a Wind Waker one, and an Oracle of Ages and Seasons one, and a Twilight Princess one, and a Spirit Tracks one, as Minty was just talking about, and a Link Between Worlds one. I mean, I can't quite believe how much there is in this game. It is, I mean, just absolutely twat-packed with content. Outside of like a freemium game or like a life sim, this game has to have the most curated content of any game I've ever played. And looking it up on How Long to Beat, it reckons it's about 400 hours to 100% the game.
Easily.
Yeah.
I've resigned myself to never doing. Now, like I said at the beginning, I had a bit of a long road to it because it was you, Chris, that convinced me to get it on the 3DS, and I'm really, really glad you did, because you said it was a better fit in terms of its pickup and playability, and I think I probably wouldn't. Well, I didn't put any time into it on the Wii U because I think you had it, Minty, didn't you, in the house?
I did indeed. Yes.
I watched you play a bit of it, but I was like, I was okay to sort of let it pass. But even though it looked a lot poorer than the Wii U, it played incredibly well on the 3DS. I mean, especially the new 3DS.
Yeah.
Because apparently it chugged along worse than Ivor the Engine's arthritic grandmother on the original 3DS.
The issue as well, the original 3DS, was it just couldn't render any enemies. So it was the difference between being like, oh, it's reasonably packed out when you played it on the new 3DS, or having like almost one-on-one battles on the regular.
Bloody hell! And like I said, the fast arcade action worked really well with it on a handheld. I remember playing it in a hotel room in North Wales whilst I was up there for a week teching a conference for the Church in Wales, and the veritable boudoir decor of this bread and breakfast in Llandudno will always be tied in with those memories of Hyrule Warriors Legends. But once I'd been drawn in by its incredibly addictive, satisfying, fun gameplay, I did then kind of wish that I had opted for the Wii U version so I could see it in all of its HD shining glory, even though it would have meant foregoing the exclusive Adventure Mode maps to the 3DS version. So when the Switch started announcing DX versions of Wii U games, from day one I had been banging on about Hyrule Warriors port and was told that it was unlikely, it wasn't going to happen, but I wanted one. I wanted a proper HD version of like the 3DS content, all of the other DLC that came with the Wii U game, just combined into one lovely, amazing package. And needless to say, who's next? Needless to say, I was absolutely beside myself when it was announced. I pre-ordered it as soon as I could, and at the stroke of midnight on the day it was released, I decided I couldn't wait until morning to get it, so I bought it on the eShop and downloaded it, and it took like an hour and a half to download on my dreadful internet at the time, and it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I played it for about 30 minutes and went to bed, but like it felt worth it, and it was everything I could ever have dreamed of. Like, carving your way through waves of moblins and gorons never felt or looked so good. I had no problem playing through the main story mode again to completion, and then I had all of those lovely adventure maps waiting for me as well, and I wasted no time diving straight in to tackle the Wind Waker one, which was just wonderful, and being able to run around the world of the Wind Waker on the Switch is something that I wouldn't like to be reserved for this game exclusively. Nintendo, please get a move on, port Wind Waker HD, Twilight Princess HD, please. Feel free to throw in Skyward Sword as well, which I know will take a lot of work, but it would make me happy, and I'd buy it, so surely it's worth £30. I'm not sure how many hours I put into the 3DS version, probably about 60, 70 hours, and I put in over 100 hours on the Switch version, and yet I've still got 3 characters to unlock out of about 30. I've completed the first adventure map about 97%, the Great Sea Wind Waker map about 98%, and the Master Quest versions of both of those about 20% each. and I haven't even touched the other 5 full maps that are in there, so I still have an enormous amount to do in the game, and I'm so glad that I did buy it digitally, because it just sits very patiently and nicely on my Switch at all times for me to pick up and dip into now and again. I must say, like, one of the really nicely designed things about the game is its menu system, which I know is a bit of a weird note for me to sort of wrap up on, and also a weird thing to praise as well. And I know that a lot of people said that they thought the game was too menu heavy, but I found it to be, pretty straightforward, pretty intuitive, and so well thought out, so you can navigate through the game and the modes and always know what you're doing, what's left to do, and how to do it. So you can sell weapons and items that you find, convert them into experience points to level your characters up. You can use amiibos to unlock even more content. You can collect and nurture fairies in the game to give you some added bonuses. On each of the main story levels, you can see really, really clearly what difficulty settings you beat it on, which character or weapon loadout you need to use to find the hidden sculpture or heart pieces in that level. And the adventure maps are really easy to navigate, to see what items you need to unlock to open the next mission, or what score you need to have gotten, where to pick up those items, which character you need to play as, which character has bonus items hidden in which levels. It's very, very comprehensively done, and I'm glad, because in a game that was a smaller size, a lot of that stuff would seem quite hand-holdy, but in this, it feels like just a gentle guide in an otherwise overwhelming amount of content. So, yeah, I mean, I wonder if I'll ever 100% the game.
No.
Probably not. Having said that, it is incredibly good to play in co-op, which does allow you to sort of double the amount of things you're unlocking. So maybe once lockdown is over, perhaps I can convince a willing friend to come over for a few fresh sessions at this absolute banger of a game. Hyrule Warriors, brilliant.
Excellent game. Love it so much.
I think for value proposition, it's got to be one of the best games on the Switch.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's easily dismissed as just a spin-off. My friend Johan recently said, when I said he should look into getting it, he was like, isn't it just like a spin-off like Link's crossbow training? And the answer I gave was no. And I resisted the temptation to say it's going to be in my list. But hopefully when he hears this, he'll now, because he's got a Wii U, hopefully now he'll go and buy it, because Johan, you should, and then tell us what you think of it.
Please do.
And enjoy it and love it. So lastly, but not leastly, we have Minty Booth. Can you please tell us about your 22nd favourite video game of all time, please, Clement?
Minty.
Yes, I'm going to start today's segment with The Poser. What are your 3 goals in life?
Get married, which I've done, which is great, to a wonderful wife. That was, I mean, there were times when I didn't think that was going to happen, but it has, and that's wonderful. Win an Oscar, which I'm working on. Don't know what a third one is. Raise a good child, I think.
Good. That's good.
So, well, my wife's working on more actively than I am at the moment.
For me, I want to. One day I want to have a family. Like I do want to have kids one day. I'm not sure what time I'm going to get to that stage, but I would like to one day. I think I want to be in a position with my teaching and my work where I feel I'm very good at what I do, and I think I'm okay, but I don't think I'm quite as good as I could be. And third, I want to be involved in the production of a game at some point and have someone else play it and go, good job. I think I'd really like that, because we spend so much time talking about them. I spend so much time thinking about them, but I would love to be actively involved in some capacity outside of just like spending a tenner to have your name in the credits from Kickstarter.
How about you, Minty?
Well, here are mine. I want to set a politician's car on fire. I want to leave a big bag of dog shit outside the staff entrance of the Home Office. And I want a game that not only provides exciting, fluid gameplay mechanics, but also holds the established and, quite frankly, completely bullshit canon of the series it's based on with a featherlight touch, and provides thousands of hours of gameplay that never becomes repetitive. A game that says, this is how you play, now fight your way through every single game in the series on our terms. Weird to think that Hyrule Warriors was met with,
Oh.
with skepticism when it was announced, considering the general structure of every Zelda game is just boy discovers destiny but becomes involved in something worldwide. Boy saves the day. Why wouldn't that work as a Dynasty Warriors spin-off? For clarity, my game today is the definitive edition of Hyrule Warriors, released on the Switch.
Wonderful.
It edged out the vanilla version because I didn't get the 3DS version, and the Switch one has the Wind Waker content added, and I really like the character model for the big blins from the 3DS Zelda games. Yeah, they're fun to just smack around, aren't they? Anyway, my first exposure to Musou games when I played maybe Dynasty Warriors 7 at a friend's house. After you'd given it a thorough paddling, you started off a new campaign.
I was not prepared for that R.
We started off in a new save file, and I had fun sort of bumbling around the first couple of levels at the skill level of a novice, just before my friend took the controller and did a little menu wizardry and let me play as a super-powered late game Lu Bu for a while. So I've enjoyed both ends of the Dynasty Warriors spectrum, but this was my first time going from one end to the other. Obviously Link is going to be the Lu Bu of the game, rather the OP character, poster boy for the series, spread of weapons, a very elemental attribute, the one you use in the story mode, so he's the strongest you'll have by the end. But it doesn't really matter thanks to the leveling system. You can overlevel Link and spend rupees to level up other characters to the same level. I really like that, and I really appreciate the leg up it gives, especially when you unlock characters so late in adventure mode, which is what I'm going to come on to next. Following the Disgaea model of the main game is the tutorial.
Yeah.
Hyrule Warriors has you unlock a wide-reaching and familiar roster of characters from all across the series for letting you loose on maps with hundreds of levels. Hundreds of levels, based on pretty much every game from the series. Every segment of the map has a different character you need to play as and something new to unlock. Perhaps Grid Reference E2 will give you a bomb that you can then use to unlock map square G8. And then that will unlock the secret character Zant. You use Zant on map reference J9 to unlock a new weapon for Midna. That new weapon with Midna on B3, you can use that to gain more health. Every battle you do gives you something. It bolsters you, it gives you a reason to fight. It doesn't even matter that you've beaten the game at that point, the main game. The sheer thrill and joy is conquest, crushing thousands of enemies, and a few deft sword swings, unlocking map square by the bucket load. It's the word cascade given form in an interactive experience.
Wonderful. What a line.
I listened back to what Jonathan had to say about this game and the Zelda series in general, more specifically the absolute shit show of the Zelda timeline, and I have to say that Hyrule Warriors is the perfect culmination of every iteration of the Fated 3. I don't really understand why feckless, sweaty nerds are so intent on slapping an order onto the events of the Zelda games. It doesn't matter. Think of it like getting a delicious milkshake. Obviously, one of the things you want to do is, however briefly, and if no one's looking, is just blow some bubbles into it. Each bubble is a Zelda game. There's no rhyme or reason to what order they pop up in, but they're all there, and it's so fun. Just enjoy the effervescence. Almost every Zelda game has been or will be on my list, and for good reason. Each game is wonderful, and there's so much fun to play, but this collection of the struggles of the heroes of the Triforce is an astoundingly fun game. A whistle-stop tour of the entire Zelda timeline that does away with the order of events, but rather focuses on the greater evils vanquished, the challenges overcome, the allies gained, and the set pieces visited. If you have a copy of the Hyrule Historia and cling to it as the definitive authority of the order of events happened, please, just throw it away, rethink your priorities, and then treat the joyful effervescence of Hyrule Warriors as your guide. Please, have some fun with it. Just enjoy this game, please.
It's R3 Sense approved.
It is R3 Sense approved.
There it is, yeah.
Fantastic! It's just an amazing game, absolutely amazing. I'm so glad that you two love it. Like, well, not quite as much and more than me, respectively. But yeah, I'm so thrilled. I really wish it had online co-op. That is the only thing, because then I think we would play a lot of it together.
Yeah.